She scrubbed the floors and sang, thinking no one could hear her. But the theater director stood backstage. Subscribe, write in the comments. What country are you watching this video from? The day began like all the others. A buzzing alarm clock at 5:30 a.m., a dim kitchen light barely illuminating the cracked tile floor, and the quiet groan of an old coffee pot sputtering to life. Danielle Watson didn't sigh anymore when her body resisted motion. She simply obeyed it. Her mother lay in the bedroom next door, already stirring with a rasping cough that scratched the air like dry leaves. The medicine had to be administered by 6, and the bus to the supermarket wouldn't wait. Danielle tied her coarse, once black curls into a fraying bun, wrapped a scarf around her head, and pulled on the oversized hoodie she wore like armor. The air outside was still dark, still asleep as she stepped into it. She was used to that silence now. It greeted her like an old friend, one that never spoke but always understood. By 7 a.m., she was pushing mop buckets across linoleum aisles under fluorescent supermarket lights. She wiped down glass freezer doors covered in fingerprints and crayon streaks left by restless children. She smiled out of habit, not out of joy, the kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. By noon, her back ached and her palms were raw from bleach. At 2:30, she rushed home to prepare her mother's lunch, crushed her pills into mashed potatoes, and made sure the front door was locked twice. She placed a bottle of water beside the bed, kissed her mother's forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back after midnight." Her mother nodded faintly, a gesture more memory than intention. By 3:15, Danielle was at the back entrance of the Avery Grand Theater, a building so old it creaked when no one moved. She changed into her gray uniform in the janitor's closet, tied on her apron, and grabbed the mop that had become an extension of her arm. For the next 9 hours, she would be invisible. The theater was a monument to someone else's past. Velvet curtains hung like tired eyelids, the seats groaned under the weight of time, and the chandeliers clung to the ceiling like fading stars. It was beautiful, in a way only forgotten things can be. For Danielle, it was sacred. She didn't work here. She worshipped here. She moved through the aisles with silent grace, collecting discarded programs, sweeping up popcorn and crumpled tissues. The cast and crew bustled around her without acknowledgement, like she was part of the furniture. She preferred it that way. Recognition was dangerous. Expectations were worse. By 11 o'clock, the theater emptied. Footsteps faded, voices drifted out into the streets, and the stage lights dimmed. Danielle checked the doors, twice, as always, and then stood alone in the center of the auditorium. A low hum of the building's breath lingered in the silence. She looked up at the ornate ceiling, then at the worn-out boards beneath her feet. The air seemed to tremble slightly, like it remembered music. She removed her gloves slowly, almost ceremonially, placed the mop against the wall, and stepped onto the stage. For a moment, she simply stood there. The house was empty, but in her mind, it was full. Full of breathless silence, expectant eyes, hearts open like blooming flowers. She drew in a breath that scraped against her ribs and let it out as a single note, deep and steady. Then another, then the first phrase. Her voice filled the room like smoke, dark and curling, rich and bruised with longing. She sang Summertime as if she had written it herself, letting each word float gently from her lips, soaking into the velvet seats and chandeliers above. She didn't sing for applause. She sang because it hurt not to. In that moment, Danielle was not a janitor. She was not poor. She was not tired. She was not anyone's caretaker. She was a vessel. She was her voice. Unbeknownst to her, someone else was listening. Adela Harper had been in the Avery Grand Theater earlier that evening for a meeting with the director. She had been invited to consult on a retrospective performance, a revival of a show she had once starred in 40 years ago. The meeting had ended in polite disagreements and empty promises, and she had lingered backstage alone, nursing the bitter cocktail of memory and regret. The theater still smelled the same: dust, wood polish, and the distant perfume of ambition. She had wandered out into the wings when she heard the voice. It stopped her cold. She stood behind the curtain, not daring to breathe. Her hands trembled, old bones aching with awe. The voice was not polished, not trained, but it was alive. Raw, aching, full of wounds and warmth. a voice born from hunger, silence, and survival. It wrapped around her like a blanket and pierced her like a blade. When the final note died, the theater fell into a silence so complete, it rang. Danielle turned slowly to collect her mop, ready to disappear back into the shadows. Then came the sound she never expected. Applause. Not thunderous, not polite, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Danielle froze. Her chest tightened. Her eyes darted toward the sound. From the shadows beyond the orchestra pit, a tall woman emerged, her silhouette elegant and unmistakable. She walked slowly, like someone who knew the weight of attention and how to wield it. Her white hair was pulled into a graceful bun, her face framed with large, round glasses that made her eyes seem too wise to be real. "Encore," the woman said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "Please." Danielle clutched the mop like a weapon. I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." "You were magnificent," the woman said, stepping into the stage lights. "What's your name, dear?" Danielle took a step back. "I'm not supposed to be on stage. I clean the floors." The woman tilted her head. "That's not what I asked." Danielle looked at the woman more closely now. Her posture, her presence. It felt familiar, like a ghost from a story. "You're Adela Harper?" Adela smiled faintly. "Still recognized. That's flattering." Danielle's heart thundered in her chest. You were on Broadway." "Once," Adela replied. "And tonight, I heard a voice that doesn't belong to a mop. It belongs to the world." Danielle laughed nervously. "You must be joking. I'm just a janitor." "No one is just anything," Adela said. "Especially not someone who sings like that." Danielle shook her head. "You don't understand. I'm not trained. This isn't a dream I can afford." Adela stepped closer, her eyes softening. "Dreams don't have to be expensive. Sometimes, all they cost is courage." The silence that followed was long and fragile. Danielle looked away, ashamed of how much she wanted to believe her. "I have to finish my shift," she said at last, picking up her gloves. Adela didn't stop her. "Then I'll wait. I'd like to speak with you when you're done." Danielle looked at her in disbelief. "Why?" "Because voices like yours don't come along often," Adela replied. "And when they do, they're either found or forgotten. I'd prefer not to let this one be forgotten." Danielle said nothing. She walked off stage and back into the darkness, her footsteps heavy, her thoughts heavier. But something small had ignited inside her. A whisper, a flicker, a possibility. She didn't dare name it yet. But for the first time in years, Danielle Watson went back to mopping the stage with a song still lingering on her lips and the sense that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally heard her. The next evening, the theater smelled like dust and ghosts. Danielle walked in 15 minutes early, not because she wanted to, but because sleep had abandoned her the night before. Her thoughts had swirled like storm clouds, refusing to settle. Again and again, she replayed the moment. The voice rising from her throat, the stillness of the empty seats, the slow, surreal sound of applause. Adela Harper's silhouette carved into the darkness like a statue of the past, come alive. She tried to convince herself it hadn't happened, that it was some waking dream conjured by exhaustion and longing. But the echo remained too sharp, too deliberate to be fiction. The way Adela had looked at her, like she saw through the dust, through the mop handle, into something sacred, had lodged itself into Danielle's chest like a seed she didn't ask for and didn't know how to grow. She changed into her uniform, laced her boots, pulled her hair back, but her hands trembled. She didn't see Adela that night. The next 2 days passed in a blur of routine. Waking before dawn, cleaning sticky tiles, blending pills into her mother's meals, and returning to the theater to clean the same spots where others danced, sang, and took curtain calls. She tried to forget, to scrub the memory away like gum off the lobby floor. But on the third evening, just as Danielle finished sweeping the mezzanine, a figure stood at the end of the aisle. Adela Harper. Again, not in a gown, not in theatrical makeup, just a long camel coat, leather gloves, and an expression that was both patient and piercing. "You've been avoiding me," Adela said, her voice calm as still water. Danielle nearly dropped her broom. No, you were hoping it would go away," Adela finished. "What you felt. What you made me feel." Danielle straightened, her lips tightening. It was just a moment, a mistake. Adela stepped closer, one hand resting lightly on the back of a velvet seat. You don't believe that? Danielle glanced around nervously. The theater was mostly empty, but a few stagehands lingered in the wings. She hated being the subject of attention. It made her skin itch. She started to walk away, but Adela followed with gentle persistence. Let me ask you a question, Adela said. When was the last time someone looked at you and truly saw you? Danielle paused at the top of the stairs. Adela continued. Not the uniform, not the job, not your duty to your mother, not your bills or exhaustion. You, just you. Danielle didn't turn around. Her voice was tight. I don't need to be seen. Yes, you do. And you deserve to be. Finally, Danielle turned. Why do you care? Adela's eyes softened. Because someone once cared for me, and it saved my life. The words settled between them like a truth too heavy to ignore. Danielle exhaled shakily. I've never had a lesson. I don't read music. I don't perform. Adela smiled gently. You sang like your ribs were on fire. No conservatory in this world teaches that. I don't have time, Danielle said, eyes falling. I work 2 jobs. I care for my mom. I don't have the luxury of dreaming. Dreams are not luxuries, Adela said firmly. They're lifelines. Danielle looked up, surprised by the edge in her tone. Adela took a breath, then reached into her purse and handed Danielle a small, weathered tape recorder. I want you to listen to this tonight. Danielle looked down at it, confused. What is it? Me, Adela replied. 43 years ago. A bootleg recording from my final Broadway show. It got me blacklisted. Danielle blinked. Why? I changed the ending, Adela said. The show was about a poor black woman who dies for a man who doesn't love her. I decided that night she was going to walk away instead. A slow smile pulled at Danielle's lips, despite herself. What happened? They called it insubordination. My career ended. But the audience, they stood for 10 minutes straight. Danielle held the recorder like it might break. Why are you showing me this? Because you remind me of her, Adela said, and I want to help you walk away from the version of your life someone else wrote for you. Danielle swallowed. Even if I said yes, I'm not a singer. You're not trained. That's not the same thing. Give me 1 hour a week. That's all I ask. Danielle stared at her, the tape recorder warm in her hand. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. Adela smiled knowingly. I'll be in Box B tomorrow night after closing. If you come, I'll know you're ready. She turned and walked away, leaving the scent of jasmine and defiance in her wake. That night, after checking on her mother and locking the apartment door, Danielle lay in bed with the tape recorder on her chest. She pressed play. The hiss of old tape gave way to piano chords, rich and mournful. Then came the voice. Adela's voice. It wasn't perfect. It cracked in places, but it was alive, like fire with teeth. It snarled, wept, soared. It felt like it belonged to something ancient and divine. Danielle listened 3 times before falling asleep, tears staining her pillow. The next evening, she worked as usual. She swept, she mopped, she collected candy wrappers and lipstick-stained napkins. And when midnight struck, she climbed the stairs to Box B. Adela was already waiting, dressed in a soft navy sweater, reading from a leather-bound notebook. She looked up and smiled as Danielle entered. Let's begin, she said. Danielle sat across from her, nervous. What do I have to do? First, Adela said, you breathe. For the next hour, she guided Danielle through breathwork. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She made her hum through her throat, then through her chest. She asked her to close her eyes and hum while remembering the first time she ever felt joy. Danielle's lips quivered. That's a hard one. I know, Adela whispered, but it matters. They met every week after that. Always at night, always in the quiet dark. Adela never asked too much at once. She listened more than she spoke. She gave Danielle small assignments, singing to her reflection, recording herself, writing down how a song made her feel. It wasn't just about sound, it was about truth. One night, as Danielle sang a line from an old spiritual, her voice cracked on a high note. She stopped, embarrassed. Adela didn't flinch. Do you know what that was? A mistake? A memory, Adela said. Something inside you that's still healing. Danielle bit her lip. I don't know how to fix it. You don't fix it, you sing through it. Another night, Adela brought an old photograph of herself at the 21. That's me on opening night. My knees were shaking so hard I almost fell down the stairs. Danielle laughed. You look fearless. I was terrified. I just didn't let it decide for me. As the lessons continued, Danielle began to change. Not obviously, not overnight. But slowly, something straightened in her spine. Something steadied in her gaze. The mop still touched the stage, but her feet no longer dragged. She walked as if the world owed her space. Still, the rest of the world hadn't noticed yet. One afternoon, a fellow janitor named Marcus caught her humming while cleaning the women's restroom. You trying to audition or something? He joked. Maybe get a mop solo? She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later that evening, the theater manager caught her on stage humming during a break. He frowned. Stick to your duties, Danielle. This isn't a playground. She nodded quietly, heat crawling up her neck. That night, she almost didn't go to Box B, but she did. And Adela was waiting, holding 2 cups of tea. You're starting to carry your voice like armor, she said. That's good, but now I want you to carry it like a weapon. Danielle blinked. A weapon? For every time they told you you couldn't, for every time they ignored you, for every time they called you just a janitor. Danielle swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Adela reached across the table, her fingers warm and sure. Then let me hold it with you. Until you are. Danielle nodded, and for the first time she sang not like she was trying to disappear, but like she was trying to be heard. The rain had been falling since morning, thin, persistent, and cold like memory. Danielle watched it streak down the stained theater windows as she scrubbed the tiled floor near the dressing rooms, her knees aching from the position, her knuckles raw from the brush. Every motion was automatic now, muscle and bone repeating what they had done for years. But her mind was elsewhere, on Box B, on breath exercises, on Adela's voice echoing through her from the night before. You don't sing to be perfect, Adela had said. You sing to be true, and truth cracks. Danielle had nodded, but the truth she carried was not an easy song. It was buried deep, beneath the years, the poverty, the invisible hours, and the long nights spent wondering if the world had forgotten her before it ever noticed her. She wiped her hands on a cloth and made her way toward the main stage, where the mop and bucket waited. The evening show had ended, and once again, the grand auditorium stood quiet, hollowed by absence. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the boards. The theater felt different now, not just sacred, not just haunting, but alive. Watching her, she sang, just a verse. A soft, trembling version of a gospel tune her grandmother used to hum. The acoustics swallowed her voice and bounced it back warmer, rounder. She reached for the higher note, and her throat seized. The sound broke, cracked, collapsed into silence. Her stomach turned. She tried again. The note failed again. Panic bloomed. Footsteps. Danielle spun around, breath caught in her lungs. It was Adela, arms crossed, face unreadable. You're thinking too hard, she said quietly. Danielle looked away. I messed up. You sang scared, Adela corrected. Danielle dropped her eyes to the floor. What if I'm not good enough? What if this thing I've been building isn't real? What if the voice isn't there? Adela walked closer, then sat on the edge of the stage. Let me tell you something about music. It isn't always pretty. Sometimes it limps. Sometimes it bleeds. The cracks aren't failure, they're truth. Danielle sat beside her. Her voice was a whisper. Why does it hurt so much when it breaks? Because you're singing with parts of yourself you've never spoken from, Adela said. And they remember. There was a long silence. The kind that only exists between 2 women who have suffered in parallel. Danielle told her, for the first time, about the church choir when she was 12. The way the choir director told her to step back and soften it up, because her voice was too big for a girl. How the other girls laughed, how her father called her show-off every time she sang near the kitchen. How one day she stopped singing at all. Adela listened without interruption, her hands folded in her lap. When Danielle finished, Adela said, You don't need permission anymore. Not from a man, not from the past. You just need your breath. The next session was different. Adela stood behind her, hands gently on Danielle's ribs, guiding her breath. They practiced scales not for pitch, but for pressure, for strength. Adela made her sing facing a mirror, made her look at herself while she sang words like free, worthy, alive. Danielle hated it. I feel ridiculous, she muttered, eyes skimming away from her own reflection. That's the shame talking, Adela said. Stare her down. Danielle tried, again and again, until the word worthy didn't crack her voice anymore, until alive didn't taste foreign. But not all resistance came from inside. One evening after rehearsal, Danielle lingered in the hallway by the loading dock. Her shift was nearly done when Marcus, the other janitor, sidled up beside her with a smirk. You and that old lady rehearsing some kind of one-woman show? He said with a chuckle. Danielle stiffened. She's mentoring me. Mentoring? He scoffed. Girl, this ain't American Idol. You really think someone like you gonna end up on that stage? Danielle's fists clenched, mop handle gripped like a sword, but she said nothing. She just turned and walked away.
Later that night, she didn't go to Box B. She sat backstage alone, her back against the wall, staring at the tape recorder Adela had given her. She pressed play. Adela's younger voice filled the silence, strong and fierce. Danielle listened until the batteries died. The next night, Adela arrived early. Danielle wasn't there. She waited for an hour, then another. Finally, Danielle appeared, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. I can't do this, she said without preamble. They're laughing at me. The staff, the crew, they think I'm delusional. Adela nodded slowly. Of course they do. Danielle looked up, startled. You're not going to argue? No, Adela said calmly, because what they see is only what they've been taught to believe. But what you are, that scares them. Danielle blinked. Scares them? Adela's eyes narrowed, her voice hard. They see a black woman who refuses to stay invisible. That's terrifying. Danielle's throat tightened. She tried to speak but couldn't. I won't beg you to keep going, Adela said. But I will tell you this. If you stop now, you'll carry their voices in your head for the rest of your life. Danielle closed her eyes. Her hands trembled, then she opened them. I want to keep going, she said. Adela smiled. Then come with me. She led her through the narrow corridors of the theater into a side room Danielle had never noticed. It was small, dimly lit, filled with ancient sheet music and dusty props. In the center, a stool and a single microphone stood. This, Adela said, is where I learned to own the silence before the song. She gestured to the stool. Danielle sat. Close your eyes, Adela said. Now, sing me a memory. Not a song, just the shape of something you remember. Danielle hesitated. Then, softly, she hummed. Not a tune, not a melody, just a sound, a vibration, like morning, like hunger. Adela closed her eyes too. She felt it. That night, Danielle sang like she had never sung before, not to impress, not to escape, but to survive. And it hurt. But she did it anyway. It began with a scream. Not from fear or pain, but from panic, the sharp, shrill cry of a stage manager rushing down the marble halls of the Avery Grand Theater like a bird in a broken cage. The lead is out. She's lost her voice. She can't go on. The words echoed through the building like fire alarms. In dressing rooms, performers froze with half-applied makeup. In the control booth, the lighting technician dropped his headset. In the orchestra pit, a violinist cursed under his breath. It was 15 minutes to curtain. The show was a gala performance, one night only, for a crowd full of donors, critics, and people whose names lived on brass plaques and building wings. The theater's survival depended on nights like these. The artistic director, Graham St. James, turned pale as linen. He clutched the headset so tightly that his fingers shook. Danielle, in the shadows backstage with her mop, watched the chaos erupt around her. She saw the understudy's face twist with terror as someone barked her name. She wasn't ready. She couldn't remember the lines. She looked like she was going to be sick. Adela arrived minutes later, her silver hair pulled into a high knot, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She moved like a gust of controlled wind, cutting through the chaos with calm precision. "What happened?" she asked Graham, who barely acknowledged her presence. "Marla's gone hoarse," he said, pacing, utterly silent. "Stress, probably. The understudy's frozen. We can't cancel, not with this audience." Adela turned her head, eyes narrowing. "Then use someone else." Graham looked at her. "Who?" "This isn't a classroom. It's a professional stage." Her voice cut like glass. "And you're about to have an empty one." He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I know someone who knows the music, who's been singing it in this building for weeks, whose voice could fill this hall without a microphone." His brow furrowed. "You can't be serious." "She's ready. She's not even part of the company." "No," Adela said. "She's better." Danielle stood in the wings, stunned, her heart pounding so loud it drowned the chaos. She realized slowly Adela was talking about her. "No," Danielle whispered to herself. No, I'm not." Adela turned to her as if summoned by the breath of fear. "Danielle," she said, voice soft but commanding, "you can do this." Danielle backed away, shaking her head. "I can't. I'm not ready. I've never sung in front of a crowd." "You've sung in front of judgment your entire life," Adela replied. "This is no different." Danielle's breath came fast. "They'll laugh at me, then sing so loud they choke on it." Danielle's throat burned. Adela stepped closer. "Why did you come to me? Why did you sing through your pain? Not because you wanted to be invisible, because you knew you weren't." Graham was pacing again, barking into his radio, trying to salvage the evening. Adela took Danielle's hand. It was trembling. She squeezed it. "You don't sing tonight because they deserve it," she said. "You sing because you do." Danielle stood frozen in her janitor's uniform. Her sneakers were scuffed, her hands were stained with cleaning solution. Her name tag was crooked. No costume, no makeup, no preparation. Just her. Adela turned to Graham. "She goes on." He stared at Danielle, disbelief etched into his face. "She's not even in the system." "Neither was I," Adela said flatly, "but I sang anyway." Danielle was led backstage. Wardrobe offered her a gown, but she refused. "I'm not pretending to be someone else," she said. "Let them see me." The stagehands looked at her like she was walking to her execution. The musicians whispered. The ushers stared. Adela watched it all with folded arms and eyes sharp as flint. 5 minutes later, the house lights dimmed. The curtain rose, and Danielle stood alone at center stage. There was a collective intake of breath from the audience. She could feel it, like a gust of wind aimed straight at her soul. Men in tuxedos, women in pearls, silent rows of judgment. Danielle swallowed. Her mouth was dry, her knees buckled slightly, but she steadied herself. She thought of her mother's frail smile. She thought of 12-year-old Danielle pushed to the back row of the choir. She thought of Marcus's smirk, of the theater manager's glare, of all the times she was told, "You don't belong here." Then she thought of Adela's voice, calm, unwavering. "Carry your voice like a weapon." Danielle closed her eyes, and she sang. The first note was soft, uncertain, like a hand reaching into the dark, but the second was stronger, the third deeper. By the end of the first phrase, her voice had filled the hall. It wasn't perfect. There were cracks, tremors, moments where the truth bent her breath. But it was alive. It was fierce. It was hers. The audience sat frozen. Not one cough, Not one whisper, not even a shifting seat. They listened, because they had no choice. By the time she finished, tears blurred her vision. Her final note hovered in the air, trembling until it dissolved into silence. And then, a single clap, then two, then, all at once, like rain on rooftops, a standing ovation, not polite, not perfunctory, reverent, transformative. She saw it in their faces, not pity, not novelty, respect, recognition. Danielle blinked at the lights, overwhelmed. Her hands shook. She bowed once, simply, then stepped off the stage. Backstage, the chaos had shifted. No one spoke. People made way for her, stepping back like she had become untouchable. Adela stood at the end of the hallway. They locked eyes. Danielle walked slowly, unsure what to say. Adela reached out and cupped her face with both hands. "You didn't just sing," she said. "You changed the air." Danielle's voice cracked. "I thought I'd faint." "You didn't." "I was so scared." "You should be," Adela whispered. "That's how you know it matters." From behind them, Graham approached, his voice unusually humble. "Miss Watson, I'd like to speak to you about an opportunity." Danielle turned to him, then looked back at Adela. She smiled. "I already have one." The morning after the performance, Danielle awoke before the sun rose. She expected to feel different, transformed, maybe, like the moment she stepped off that stage had unzipped her old skin and revealed someone new. But instead, she felt still, quiet, as if something sacred had passed through her and all she could do was breathe carefully, not to disturb it. Her mother was already awake, propped against the pillows, a cup of lukewarm tea in her trembling hands. Danielle kissed her forehead and sat beside her in silence. "I saw it," her mother said softly. Danielle blinked. "You did?" "I watched the live stream on the church's Facebook page. Pastor Collins sent me the link." Her mother chuckled faintly. "He said, 'Didn't know your daughter was hiding a hurricane in her throat.'" Danielle's eyes stung. Her mother reached for her hand. "You looked like you were flying." Danielle wanted to speak, but words trembled too much to leave her. She just nodded. She spent the rest of the day fielding messages. Most from strangers, emails, voicemails, social media tags she didn't know she had. There were requests for interviews, podcast appearances, and one tentative invitation to audition for a summer jazz festival in Harlem. The theater's marketing team had posted a clip of her performance on every platform they owned. It had gone viral by lunchtime, but through it all, she kept checking her phone for one name: Adela. No message came. Danielle called 3 times. No answer. By evening, she went to her apartment. The hallway smelled of lavender and old wood. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were dim, the record player humming softly. A nurse sat in the corner chair, reading. "She's resting," the nurse said gently. She didn't want to be alone. Danielle entered quietly. Adela lay in bed, her skin pale, her breathing shallow but steady. Her eyes flickered open when Danielle approached. "You did it," Adela rasped. Danielle knelt beside her. "You were right. I didn't die." Adela smiled faintly. "You were magnificent." Danielle clutched her hand. "Don't you dare leave me now." "I've done my part," Adela said. "The rest is yours." "No," Danielle whispered. "You're not a part. You're the whole reason this happened." Adela coughed lightly. "I saw something in you the moment you opened your mouth. A voice like that only comes from a life that's been forced to whisper too long." Tears slipped down Danielle's face. "You can't leave me." "I'm not," Adela said. "I'm just changing form." She motioned weakly toward a drawer. Danielle opened it and found an envelope with her name in Lupin cursive. Inside was a letter and a key. Adela exhaled slowly. My last gift. That night, Adela passed in her sleep. The theater lowered its flag to half-mast. A memorial appeared in the lobby with black and white photos from her Broadway years. Flowers, candles, a book of signatures. Critics wrote tributes. Playbills printed her name in italics, but none of it felt enough. Danielle stayed away from the theater for a week. She needed space to grieve, to sit with the silence Adela had left behind. It didn't ache like a wound. It pressed like a weight, a sacred one. When she finally opened the envelope, she found a letter that began simply, Danielle. My voice found its echo in yours. Don't stop singing. Ever. The key opened a small storage unit across town. Inside were dozens of notebooks, folders of handwritten compositions, programs from every show Adela had ever sung in, and a single reel of 16mm film. On the lid, written in faded marker, for the girl who finds me. Danielle spent nights reading Adela's diaries, her triumphs, her betrayals, her heartbreaks. She learned about the producer who blackballed her, the love she had with a married director, the joy she found teaching children after the stage closed its doors. It felt like inheriting a voice that stretched across decades. With that voice in her bones, Danielle returned to the Avery Grand. She didn't enter through the back. She came through the front. The staff paused when they saw her. She was no longer in uniform. She wore a long black coat, her curls loose around her shoulders, her posture upright. The artistic director greeted her with a smile that bordered on reverence. We'd like to feature you in our winter series, he said. Danielle smiled back. Under one condition. Yes? I want to organize a concert, a benefit, for girls like me. Girls like you? Danielle looked around at the velvet and brass, the polished chandeliers, the names carved in wood. Girls who were told they don't belong here, who were told to clean this stage, not stand on it. He hesitated but nodded. We'll make it happen. The concert took place 3 months later. The posters were simple. A voice rises in memory of Adela Harper. Proceeds went to fund scholarships for music programs in underfunded schools across the city. Danielle opened the night with a song Adela had written but never performed, a haunting, blues-infused melody called Room to Breathe. The sheet music had been tucked into the bottom of a box, handwritten and fragile. Danielle sang it like a prayer. The audience wept. By the final note, the room was standing. As applause thundered, Danielle looked into the house. She saw young girls, black girls, brown girls, girls with their hair tied in scarves, girls holding their mother's hands. She thought of her mop, tucked now in the back closet of her memory, no longer a symbol of invisibility, but of what had come before. She stepped to the microphone and waited for the room to quiet. My name is Danielle Watson, she said. I used to mop this stage, and I thought that was all I'd ever do here. The audience held their breath. But then someone heard me. She saw me. She reminded me that dreams don't come with instructions, just invitations. She held up Adela's letter. This was mine. She looked into the crowd again, locking eyes with a girl in the second row whose face was lit with awe. Now I'm inviting you. Silence. Then thunder, not of judgment, but of welcome. And as the curtain fell, Danielle whispered the last line Adela had ever said to her, I'm not just singing, I'm breathing again. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe to the channel, Watch the next video to continue, or explore others you haven't seen yet. And if someone needs to hear this, share it.